And I do believe, from a coaching perspective, I'd see it, but also just from a human perspective, I would see, people sometimes struggling, trying to get through the adversity that sometimes we face on a daily basis. And you guys face a whole lot more today than I did when I was teaching back in the day. So, my hat goes off to you. And, I want to talk a little bit about the mental toughness side of it here, and I want to give you a couple of examples of that. But I just know this, that in the mental toughness world, and in the coaching world too, sometimes it's like, hey, just suck it up. That's what you're supposed to do, suck it up and get your job done. Well, I think there is a time and a place to say that. But suck it up doesn't give anybody a strategy to really actually get through the adversity, does it? And I think that's one of the most important things that we can remember in regards to, whether it's those students sitting down or whether that's you, is just to recognize how do we fix the problem when they start to come at us. Because again, those students are going to come here in the next couple, 3 days. And some days are going to be better than others, but the bottom line is you're going to hit adversity every single day. And so I hope that a couple of things that we can say here in a strategy or two that I can give you will give you some hope in regards to just handling small things that may be able to, maybe they could be big things, but you can make them small things in your classroom as well. But world-renowned sports psychologist, his name is Dr. Spencer Wood. He says you will never, ever consistently outperform your own self-belief system. So on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say all of y'all's talent's 8. That's pretty good on a scale of 1 to 10. But your self-belief system is only a 6. So if your self-belief system is only a 6, but your potential is an 8, what are you going to play at? Whether you're in the sports world or whether you're a teacher or whatever, well, obviously you're going to play at that 6 because that's what you believe in yourself in. And so how do you get past that? And what do you do to develop and play completely and totally up to your potential? And I think that's one of the things that has to do with the mental side of the game, whether it's teaching, living the world that we live in right now, like it's a difficult thing some days. But what you tell yourself really does matter. It really does. What you tell your students really does matter. What you tell your children, your grandchildren, really does matter. And you say, well, Coach, I know that. I get that. I think the most difficult part is to recognize it in the moment when we get frustrated, and I'm speaking from experience on that, okay? But it's to recognize it in the moment when the frustration starts to go high and you're trying to figure out how to get control back in the classroom, whatever the case may be, is how do you get that done? Well, the number one thing that you can do, and you can look at the sports world, you can look at a lot of different places, but I see, I don't know how many of you guys are Royals fans, being this close to Kansas City, but I'm a nerd when it comes to baseball. I love Kansas City Royals, and I watch almost every game. If we're at home, I watch the Royals. And I always see, all players do this, but Bobby Witt Jr., he does it every single pitch. Now, you're going to say, well, how does the sports world relate to me? Well, I think I hope you'll be able to relate it. When he does this as he's getting ready, right before he steps in the box, he goes, you guys know what I mean. If you've ever seen Bobby Witt, it's this huge breath that he takes and he exhales and he relaxes his muscles and he slows his heart rate down a little bit, and then he gets in the box, and then he's ready to go, right? Well, the same thing is going to have to apply when you're at the head of the classroom and you've got a handful of students that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And I just know from a teaching standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, I could go from 0 to 10 just like that with the stress level, not think about taking a deep breath and start ripping a little bit, from a coaching standpoint, from a teaching standpoint, and probably say a lot of things in my years that I coached and taught that I regret. And so catching yourself in that moment and realizing, the one way that I can play up to my potential is that I make sure that I keep my heart rate down and I make sure that I'm thinking about what I'm getting ready to say to that student or the students that you're getting ready to speak to. Because what you say really does matter. And I will challenge you a little bit further on that one. Day 1 of class, you're going to have a student or students that walk into the classroom that they have a history. And that history is one of, man, they create havoc sometimes for teachers, depending on who they are, right? I would challenge you to do everything in your power to reach out to that student in a one-on-one situation and develop a relationship with them. And when I mean develop, you don't have to take forever with them, but just let them know, listen, I'm here for you, and I'm listen, whatever happens in that classroom, if they do disturb the classroom, if they do struggle, whatever, like bring them out and talk to them and let them know, listen, I'm here for you, not against you. And so, I just think that sometimes, and I speak from experience when I say this, but my wife and I, we were in, I think we were in Chicago, and we were getting ready to get on another flight to go speak somewhere else. And I walked into the bathroom, and I got ready to use it. Well, there was a 14-year-old kid with headphones on, and he was bobbing up and down. He was rapping it out, man. He didn't care who was standing around him. We're in this huge, humongous bathroom in Chicago airport. And it was just kind of comical, It's like that's the way our younger people are these days. That, when I grew up, we'd have never thought about doing something like that. But today, that's the norm. Well, we can either say, well, that kid just doesn't get it, or we can say, how do I relate to that young man? What do I say? What do I do? How do I do that? And listen, I had a lot of losses, whether it was as a basketball coach, and sometimes, in relationships, I didn't do the greatest in regards to some of the things that I said, right? But this particular moment, this kid caught me. I don't know what it was, but we walk out of the bathroom, and I heard him rapping, and I said, hey, what were you listening to there? He's like, what? I said, what were you listening to? He says, I can't even remember the name that he talked about. I said, well, I said, have you ever heard of the rapper called Dax? I said, he's now kind of a country singer. And he said, no, I hadn't heard of him. I said, well, you need to look Dax up. What are you thinking? He kind of looked at me like, who is this old man, right? And so I pulled out my phone. And before we walked out the bathroom, just on the side, I said, take a look at this guy right here. And I showed him Dax. He says, why are you listening to Dax? I said, because he played for me. He's a player of mine. He was a former player. And I said, when he played for me, we didn't even know he could sing, let alone if you look Dax up, you're going to find out he's absolutely big time now. Well, this 14-year-old kid, he's like, man, he says, you know this guy? He said, I have heard him. I heard the song, and he reeled it off, and I can't even remember what the name of the song was. Because I'm not a huge rap. Even though I'm a basketball coach, I heard a lot of rapping, right? In the locker room. I'm not a huge rap guy myself personally. That being said, what I always wanted to try to do is relate to my guys, so I allowed them to listen to things, hopefully wasn't inappropriate, but things that, would kind of get them going, right? And I think that's another thing. You got to meet them where they are. And this young man, I don't even know where he was from, where he was going. Man, he did one of these numbers. Man, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And so he got Dax on his phone. Well, if you look Dax up, you'll find out Dax, along with Darius Rucker, had the #1 song on all genres for 5 consecutive weeks in a song called "To Be a Man." He's pretty good at what he does. He started off spoken poetry, then he went to rapping, and don't listen to some of his early stuff. I told the kid, listen, too many F-bombs in that thing. I don't want you to listen to that. And I always tell, his name's Daniel Nawasha. I tell him, don't be, you don't have to have all those F-bombs in there. Your message is good. It's already good. What you're saying is going to help a lot of people. You're going to impact a lot of people. You're going to need, I got to relate to the young people. Yeah, you already are, then. Anyway, that was a win for me that day, is what I'm saying. And I didn't always win when I taught or coached. And that young man walked out of there. I'll never see him again in my entire life. And I'm going to tell you something. I bet I felt better about that than he did. Because I don't know what it was. It was like, man, I just want to talk to this kid. So I did. And the next thing you know, man, he's hugging me before we head back down to our gates. And it was pretty cool. And so I guess what I'm trying to tell you is you're going to have those people in your classroom that your first impression may not be the greatest. But if you really work at it and you get out of your comfort zone a little bit, you might be able to find out what is the interest of that young person. What do they really love? And then really speak to them about that and let them know, listen, I care about what's going on with you. But it starts with a mentality that's behind recognizing that, before maybe I wouldn't have said something, now I'm going to. And so I guess I'm just challenging all of you. There's one person in your classroom every single time they walk in that you may have not have gotten to know a year ago. I hope this year you will do everything in your power to find out a little more about that person. And when you find out about them, they need that, just so you know. They need you. Your guys' job, man, I get emotional when I say this. You guys' job is so important. It's way more important than when I taught. Because they need you. And they need what you do every single day. And the most thing they need, no matter how bad their attitude might be, is to let them know that, you know what, I do care. I'm still going to hold you accountable, but I do care about what you're doing. And I'm going to be there for you. I'm not against you. And I think when you give them that message, you'll be amazed at what they might potentially do for you. I didn't mention to you that I always get emotional when I speak. Because your profession is so near and dear to my heart. And those students that you have every day, I just know how much you can truly make a difference in their lives. Who remembers 2018 NCAA basketball tournament? You're like, who remembers back in 2018? Nobody does. Well, let me ask this question. Who remembers the very first number 16 seed that beat a number 1 team? Yell it out if you know that team. Give it to me, Coach. UMBC, man. Number 16 seed UMBC, and they beat? Virginia. Virginia was not only the number 1 seed, they were the number one seed. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's 4 number 1 seeds. Well, there's a number 1 seed, a number 2 1 seed, and so on. They're the best team in the tournament. UMBC, supposedly, at least by numbers, was the worst team that got in the tournament. I remember watching that game. And, it's always fun to watch 1 and 16 because number 1's going to end up winning, right? It was prior to that game, number 16 seeds were 0 and 135 against number 1 seeds. 0 and 135. So nobody, including myself, thought that UMBC was going to win that game. Well, the game started, and Virginia's known for their defense. Tony Bennett, incredibly, probably one of the better defensive coaches that ever coached the game. And so most of their games are very low scoring. So at halftime, it's 22-22, which for me, from a coaching perspective, it didn't even faze me because I knew that Virginia was going to come out in the second half and just like all number 1 seeds do against 16 seeds and just kick their tail. But that's not what happened. UMBC came out in the second half, and they went on like a 6-0 run, and Tony Bennett gets up and gets the timeout as fast as he can to try to stop the run. Now we're in the second half, not the first. And so they go back out on the court, and UMBC, they go on another run. It was like an 8-0 run this time, and now Virginia's down 14, and Tony Bennett's getting another timeout. He's trying to stop the run. Like, history is getting ready to happen if this continues. And I'm going to tell you what, I still did not think UMBC was going to win that game. But as the game proceeded, Virginia they got it back into single figures, I think, one time, and then UMBC got it back out. UMBC ends up winning that game 72-52. UMBC scored, I said 22 all at half. It was 21 all at half. So they scored 51 points in the second half. Virginia gave up 51 points a game against way better teams on paper than UMBC all season long, and that second half gave up 52, I should say. They beat them by 20. They're the first team to ever do it. They made history. It was amazing to watch it. Now, I'm a Tony Bennett fan. I'm not necessarily a Virginia fan, but I loved how Tony Bennett coaches. I've always been a huge fan, and I was kind of mixed emotions. Like, man, I loved UMBC, what they did, and then I was like, man, I wouldn't want to be Tony Bennett right now. Because from a coaching perspective, man, those incredible wins and the things you do are just, it's a high like you can't even describe. But those losses, you can't describe those lows because they're the worst thing ever. But I want to talk quickly about UMBC here, and then get to my next story here, so we can get to the mental health side of this too. But so UMBC, can you imagine? Why did they think they could be the very first team to beat a number 1 seed? Wouldn't you love to have been in that locker room pregame just to hear what the coach had to say to him? Wouldn't you have loved to have been there? They had a point guard that just was not intimidated. Like, he did not care that they were Virginia and they were the Giant. He did not care. He came out, he was doing all this stuff here, and he's making passes, and they were trying to put more pressure on. He was making them look silly. Best team in the nation. Why would he think he could do that? And how does that relate to us in this room today? Well, maybe not all of us in here will do something like UMBC did that day, but I'm going to tell you something. When you believe in yourself, when you believe, amazing things can happen. And I guess that's where I always go back to the students, and what you do and how you do it. Because what you do is going to be really important. UMBC said, I don't care if you're Virginia, I'm walking on that court, I'm going to stick my chest out, and I'm going to prove to you with my play what I'm going to do today. And they did one of the greatest things ever in the history of the game of basketball, in NCAA men's basketball. And then there was Virginia. Tony Bennett, the head coach. Millions of people were annihilating him already on social media. Oh, different day and age, isn't it? They were annihilating him. Just think about that for a second. Just think if 10 people were annihilating you on social media, let alone millions of people annihilating you. Saying he can't coach, his style of play doesn't get it done, their defensive stuff, they need to learn how to score, blah, 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 right? Everybody is annihilating him and annihilating his team. So those players that didn't get it done are also being annihilated by social media, by millions and millions of people. And so this is the part I want you to really hear. What did Tony Bennett do? How did he handle that situation? Well, on the way to the post game, after they had lost that game, they're heading to the post game press conference, and he has to take it's a rule. So every head coach has to take 2 players with him, win or lose. So I'm sure he took the 2 players that he thought could handle this the best. Man, you talk about handle something. You don't want to answer the questions they're getting ready to ask. But they had to do it anyway. So they're walking down the hallway. This long hallway to the press conference. Tony Bennett is saying to his players, we're going to start the process today. We never want to forget this moment. He said, we will start, I have it exact how he said it, that's why I'm reading it. We will start to embrace the questions now. Do not run from this. You will take this head on each and every day prior to the post-game press conference. I just think that's amazing. I look here at, I know there's many people in here that coach, but I know Coach LeBel. I don't think I could have done that. I don't think I'd have been so out of it thinking to myself, oh my gosh, we just lost this game. What am I going to do? I probably would, hey guys, try to keep your composure when we get in front of all the people asking all the crazy questions because you're getting ready to get it. But Tony Bennett was just on top of it. And I can imagine how he felt. I mean, he had to feel just absolutely brutal. And so he started the mental toughness with his team prior to the post game after losing, arguably it's the most famous loss in NCAA history. It's the very first one seed to ever lose to a 16 seed. Anybody know who won the national tournament the next year? Virginia, that gave me chills right there. That gave me chills. Virginia won the national championship the next year. But here's what people don't remember. You see, he started that mental toughness stuff with his players and the belief in what they're going to do before they ever got to the press conference. Literally within 10 minutes of the game, he's already started on it with them. And then you can just count on the fact that every single day they were together, they were gonna talk about something that had to do with belief in themselves. Belief when things aren't going well. Belief when you are down by 10, what are you going to do? Belief that when the students walk in that day, all of a sudden their attitudes are absolutely horrible. And a belief that I'm going to find a way to get them back under control here, and I'm going to do it because I'm going to do it the right way. And not give in to the fact that, because listen, I've stood before a classroom before thinking, are you kidding me, man? Maybe I just need to walk out that door and get the heck out of here because these kids are out of control. And I'm, probably be a person that people say, man, you probably had pretty good control. Well, maybe. The point being is that you're going to have days like that. Well, it relates to what man, you find a way when you believe in what you're going to do, and you tell yourself, you embrace the fact, listen to me, you embrace the fact that day one of school, when they walk through that door, hopefully it's going to be better than every other day because it's day one and they're a little bit afraid to do something, but guess what? They're still going to do stuff. They're kids. But when you embrace the fact that you're going to stand up and you're going to handle that, and you believe in yourself, you'll be amazed at how that will relate to those students, no matter what their age is. No matter what their age is. And I just... the thing about that people don't understand about Tony Bennett, the following year, they were in the first round. They were the number one seed again the following year. And they were in the first round again, and at halftime trailing by 7 points to another number 16 seed. But the difference was that when those players went in at halftime this time, they were thinking, no, we got this. They probably played a little tight the first half, thinking about the year before a little bit, right? But in the second half, I'm sure, Coach Bennett and his players, because he had developed it, they start talking about the importance of relaxing and playing the game. And I just really hope that whether you're a first-year teacher or you're a 30-some-year teacher, whatever it is, that you can relate that to your classroom and what you do, that you can relax and let it fly. It's a phrase I always use with my players. And letting it fly simply means you be yourself, but you have the confidence in yourself to know that you can get the job done. And here's the other part of that. Always know this, is that if you're struggling, and you will, I don't care what age you are and how many years you've been teaching, there'll be a time when you'll struggle. This is the part we got to change as society. Go talk to your colleague. Reach out. It is okay to reach out. No matter what our age is, reach out to someone and say, you know what, I got a kid in there and I don't know what to do with that kid. And get some ideas and get some people to, help you with the support that you need in order to make the decisions that you want to make sure that every kid gets the kind of education they're supposed to get because you're doing your job. Tony Bennett's amazing. He's an amazing coach. They won a game in triple overtime in that tournament that year. Year they won the national championship. They won a game on a last-second shot, a three-pointer. And you don't think every small detail doesn't matter? You don't think what we say doesn't matter? Every small detail matters. Because there's no way they win a national championship the next year if he doesn't do what he's doing. And they barely got it done, but they got it done. And so the details do matter. I want to talk real quickly about, I always talk about, one percenters. When I played at Newman many years ago, I had an assistant coach. His name was Joe Curl. And Coach Curl has passed away since, but Coach Curl always used to be jacked up in our practices. And he was the energy guy. He was a 6'8" redhead. And if somebody got on the floor after a loose ball, man, he'd be running over there. And that's a 1%er right there. That's a 1%er. Well, it's pretty cool to play for somebody like that. It's firing you up when you're doing the right thing, right? And he'd pull you up, and he'd make all of your teammates get you off the floor, and he'd be fired up. 1%er right there, 1%er, And you know what a 1%er is, right? Like it's the person that'll do things that 99% of other people won't do. In the sports world, when you find somebody that's successful, most of the time they're a 1%er. And you know why they are? Because they do things that other players won't do to get themselves ready to go. And they do it consistently. and they do it from a monotonous standpoint. So in the teaching world, sometimes it becomes monotonous. You've got to do those small details, right? And you do it every day, and you do it consistently. And the same thing is with the sports world. Well, that coach always inspired me. Coach Curl, he just inspired me. Well, I had a handful of players in 30 years of being a head coach that were one percenters, but I want to tell you a quick story about a young man by the name of Reggie Riley. So Reggie Riley was from inner city Detroit, Michigan. And can you hit that so they can see who Reggie is? Yeah, so there's Reg. Now, when you look at that little white thing sticking out of his mouth, Reg, that's not a tooth issue, that's a piece of gum. Okay? Reggie was the only player that I coached in all those years that every single game he played with a piece of gum in his mouth. It's just what he did. He did it in high school, college, and so that's a piece of gum sticking out of his mouth. That's Reg. He's in Detroit, Michigan. So out of high school, Reggie goes to Corsicana, Texas, to play for a kind of a legendary junior college coach named Lewis Orr for Corsicana Community, for Navarro County Community College in Corsicana, Texas. And I was very fortunate to, one of my coaches, old coaches that I had played for, had introduced me to Coach Orr. So when I started the program at Newman University, he said, you got to get in touch with Coach Orr down in Navarro County. And so I called Coach Orr, and Coach Orr says, yeah, he's got that southern accent. Yeah, come on down, Coach. And so I come down there. Every year I'd go down to Navarro County to recruit. I'd watch his players play. And so I walk in this day, and he says, Coach, I want you to look over there. See that player over there? He's pointing at Reggie. He says, Reggie's 6. Now, they're playing in the Texas Junior College League, okay? There's been some big-time players come from the Texas Junior College League. And Reggie, he tells me this. He says, well, Reggie's a 6'2" four-man. Now, if you don't know anything about basketball, there aren't too many 6'2" four-men, at 3A Cheney High School, let alone at the junior college level, okay? So he tells me that, I'm like, oh, okay, he's going to fill my head full of what, right? Like, sometimes that happens in our business. And then he says this. He says, no, Coach, just watch him for a little while. He's interchangeable. He played the four-man for us. He said, but he played whatever position you want him to. Okay. He said, we're going to split them up, and they're going to run. He said, Reg is going to win every game today. How does a coach tell you that before they start? And they switched teams. They didn't have the same team. They switched players throughout. And then he said, and not only is Reggie going to win, he said, this is how much of a winner he is. Not only is he going to win every game, they played 7 games and he won them all, by the way. He said, he's not even going to go get a drink of water in between games. That's not smart. We all want to hydrate, right? Especially in this kind of heat. But the point being is that Reggie, he was trying to tell me, Reggie's one tough son of a gun. And I'm like, sure enough, Reggie didn't go get a drink of water. Reggie, you know what he did? He went over and shot free throws until the next game started. Remember that one percenter? There wasn't anybody else out there for Navarro County shooting free throws in between games. But Reggie was. So I was kind of excited, At the time, we were NAI. We weren't NCAA Division II. And if I could get a player like that, he may be able to take us to the national tournament. Who knows? He may be able to make me look like I could coach, And so I went over to Reggie after they got done with the practice, and I said, Reg, I said, I just want to introduce myself. Told him where I was from. And, keep in mind, he's from Detroit, Michigan. Comes from nothing, okay? And real soft-spoken. I said, Reg, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to offer you a scholarship right here now. And he said, man, Coach, I really appreciate that. He said, but I want to make a trip to Newman before I make a decision if I'm going to go there. I understand. Well, here's what I did not know. This is why Coach Orr followed up with all of this after we got done. He said, Coach, he's got to get a class this summer. He struggles a little bit academically. Oh, okay. And Reggie looked me dead in the eye. Coach, I got to get a class this summer. Well, at Newman University, when we were NAIA, we couldn't bring him in the summer and get him a class and do all the stuff that a lot of colleges do now. We could actually do that nowadays, but not then. We didn't have money. Our travel budget, our budget for recruits, they had to bring themselves to our place. We couldn't even give them money to come to our place. This was way back in the early 2000s. And so Reggie says, but I do want to come. I said, well, I explained to him, I said, I can't give you money. I can't get you out there. How are we going to do that? I immediately thought, I'm not getting Reggie Riley. I said, how do you get to class? He said, well, Coach, I'm going to talk to my uncle, and my uncle's going to help me, and I'm going to get that class. So I'm going to get to class, Coach. And he said, and I'll also get a ticket to come to Newman to visit. Okay. Well, when you're in the recruiting world, a lot of young men tell you a lot of stuff, but many of them don't back it up, right? So I get back into Wichita, and it was kind of a sad trip back home. I was feeling sorry about myself because I thought that player could flat out go, and I'm not going to get him. I just knew I wasn't going to get him. So I get back home, and the next day I get a phone call. It's Reggie. Hey, Coach, I've already enrolled for my class. He said, I'll send that to you through email and make sure it takes care of eligibility. No player does that, by the way. No player does that. Okay, Reg, that's good. How'd you get that money? Well, my uncle helped me out. He said, I also got my ticket today. I'll be there on such and such date next week at 1 o'clock. I said, how'd you get the ticket? Well, my uncle helped me out. Okay. I said, well, what time's your flight get in? It's 1 o'clock, Coach. He said, but it's not a flight, it's the train. I'm taking the train from Detroit, Michigan to Wichita, Kansas. I said, Reg, how long is that going to take you to get from Detroit to Wichita? He said, 24 hours. Nobody does that. Reggie Riley did. He took that train, he came to Newman, we signed him, he loved it. He got back, he got the class, he came to Newman, and guess what? He made me look like I could coach. National tournament, we win. Reggie Riley, 1%er. Coach, I never had this happen. This is a specific thing, and you'll know exactly what I mean, and anybody that coaches will understand this. So in practice, we would have our guys, it wasn't a lot, but we would always have this little sheet in the locker room where on their own time, they had to go shoot 100 free throws and document them throughout the course of the week. And then we would tabulate the percentages and stuff at the end of the week, and held them accountable a little bit so that they'd go get some free throws in. Well, Reggie shot 80% in practice on the average every week. Well, that was in practice, but Reggie in games shot 84%. Okay, that never happens either, just so you'll know. Normally when a player practices, their percentage is a lot higher because there's no stress on them. But not Reggie. When he got in the game, his percentage went up. In the last 4 minutes of a game, Reggie Riley shot 94%. Well, what was so special about Reggie? Why was he a 1%er? And I asked him one day, I said, Reg, I said, why are you like that? What makes you different than everybody else? I said, because I want some of that to give to everybody else. He said, Coach, he said, you've never been to my house? He said, but you know where I come from. He says, I'm proving everybody wrong. Because nobody thought I could go anywhere. Number one, get an education, let alone to play basketball and be an All-American and go to the national tournament. Nobody from where I come from says you can get that done. I'm out to prove people wrong. Wow. Somebody that comes from absolutely nothing. Reg didn't have a dad. He only had a mom. And so, you know what's really special to me? That 1%er that he is? Every year, for over 20 years now, I get a text on Father's Day from Reggie Riley. That's what it's all about. See, Reg, he went back to Detroit, and he works and helps boys and girls club. Giving back. Trying to help those young people that didn't have anything go someplace. Well, who is that young person or those young people that are in your class? There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them. And I challenge all of you to be 1% teachers. To be just a little better than you've ever been. And if you're later on in your career, and I say this because I'm getting a little older myself, you're like, I've done this a lot of times. Man, I'm going to challenge you. There's one person out there that you can relate to, you have no idea who they are, but they're going to walk into your classroom, and you get the opportunity to change lives. And man, how special is that? Nobody gets to do what you get to do day in and day out. Man, sometimes it's hard, though. That's why I love when I get an opportunity to speak to teachers, no matter what age you teach, what age you coach. It's so special what you get to do, because I think it was John Wooden that said you guys are going to influence your students. You're going to influence them. He was more on the coach's side, but I think it's the teacher's side, because you get them every single day. You're going to influence them more in 1 year's time than anybody else is going to do in a lifetime. That's saying a lot, isn't it? That's a responsibility and accountability I think that all of us would want to invite, and then now it's our challenge to be able to walk in that classroom every day and say, here I come. Here I come. And get ready to rock and roll. I want to finish today. We're up till 9:30?
Yeah, you got some time.
Is that right? So Craig was at a superintendent's conference, I don't know, a month and a half ago or whatever. And I hadn't seen Craig in a long time, and he came up to me afterwards and asked me if I recognized him. And I said, no, you're way older, evidently, than what you used to be, because I don't recognize who you are, and I didn't. So obviously we caught up a little bit, and he ended up asking me to come up here to speak, and so I'm just honored that you did. Obviously have an opportunity to know you as long as we have. But this next topic I'm going to speak about is on mental health, and my wife and I, when we decided to take this route and decide to get out of teaching and coaching and go into to speaking, we had literally no idea where it was going to take us. And she put it up there, and we talked about the mental toughness, but you cannot be mentally tough unless you are mentally well. So many people struggle, and I'm going to give you a very quick version of my story here, just a little bit, on my own struggles with severe depression, really at the height of my coaching career. Also with incredibly high anxiety at the height of my coaching career, to the point where I had suicidal thoughts as I was trying to get my team ready in that season in 2005. And it's a little bit of a heavy topic to speak about, but it's one that we have to speak about it. Mm-hmm. And the reason we have to speak about it is because, just in this room alone, and I don't know very many people, but statistics do say, I don't talk a lot about statistics, but this one jumps out at me. They say that 1 out of every 4 people will struggle with some type of mental health issue in some form annually. So if they say 1 out of 4, that means the percentage is higher, because in mental health, the percentage, when they give you percentage, it's always lower than it actually is. Okay? Here's another statistic before I tell you a little bit more about my own journey, is that, so my wife and I, we have 4 grandchildren. We have a 10-year-old granddaughter, 7-year-old and 6-year-old granddaughters, and then a 3-year-old grandson. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10-year-olds. Wow. Most people don't know that. Our granddaughter's 10. So, this summer, we had a couple of conventions that we went to speak to that were fairly close to the Wichita area. We took our granddaughter with us. She'd been asking us. She knows what we do. We talked to her a little bit about, but she went with us, and she sat there and she listened to the entire story on mental health and the entire journey, the struggles that I went through, that my wife went through, that our family went through, because if one person is struggling in your family, everybody is struggling in your family. Trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I get them help? What are we supposed to do? You know, you guys are all, you know, what I call head coaches in the classroom. And, you know, when you think about it, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be the head coach. Well, you know, I always said this to myself as I was spiraling out of control with my thoughts. I said, you know, I'm the head coach. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a man. Right? I'm not supposed to have these problems. I know good and well there's not another coach in America that struggles like I am. I know good and well. That's what I kept telling myself. I didn't have a clue. It was in 2005 at the beginning of that basketball season at Newman University. It was after Reggie had played for me, actually. And something was different about how I felt. And I started having symptoms and signs of severe depression and anxiety. And I had a decision to make. And that decision was, you know, am I going to go talk to my wife about how I'm actually feeling? Am I going to go talk to my doctor about how I'm actually feeling? Or do I just keep my mouth shut and suck it up and pull up my bootstraps and just figure out a way to get through it? And so what decision did I make? Suck it up, of course, because that's what we do, right? That's what we do in Sedan, Kansas, a small town in Kansas, America. We don't talk about mental health. We suck it up. Probably not much different than we do in Burlington, Kansas. You know, everybody knows everybody. So it makes it even more so of a stigma when everybody knows everybody. I know that in small communities, the stigma is larger than it is in bigger communities. It is because we know each other. And there's one thing that I have to tell you in my next just few minutes here of sharing a little bit about my journey, and that is this, is that when I decided not to tell my wife, what I did was I made a decision to not be the best version of me. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't on purpose. I wasn't trying to, you know, not be the best version of me. I was trying to be the best version by sucking it up, right? Like I'm tough, you know, all those things that go with that. And the problem was that I started to spiral, and I kept spiraling. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my wonderful wife now of 41 years. So I'm going to lighten it up for just a second here, okay? So I started calling my wife when I was a 7th grader. She was an 8th grader. And so I started recruiting early, if you know what I'm saying. I guess I was destined to be a recruiter. But I tell you that for a reason. Because as I was spiraling out of control, I had that choice to make. Was I going to talk to somebody? Was I going to talk to my wife, who we'd been married at the time for 21 years, who I'd known for over 30, who had seen me cry one time in 30 years? Or am I going to keep it to myself because I thought, man, my wife might think I'm weak. I better not tell her. Because that's what society tells us to. Right? They tell us to think. They're not saying anything to anybody. Now, I do know this. We are talking about this topic a lot more today than we ever used to be. But my wife and I, we have been really blessed and fortunate to be in 30 different states talking about this particular topic. And I don't care if it's in New York City, Los Angeles, small town Nebraska, Cheney, Kansas, or right here in Burlington, Kansas. Many, many people struggle. Many people suffer in silence. Many people do not tell another person because they're afraid to tell someone because they might think that they'll think they're weak. That's the message we've sent since the beginning of time, because that's, you know, I always talk about my grandparents who, you know, grew up in the Depression, and my grandmother who, you know, left for, I remember when I was a little kid, she left for 2 weeks and came back and, where's Grandma? Well, Grandma wasn't feeling real good, so she went to get some, you know, to the doctor, and she came back. No, not one person ever said she was mentally ill. Not one person ever said she had depression. Not one person ever said she had any type of anxiety or bipolar or anything that had to do with mental health. No, nobody said that to me. Oh, okay, well, Grandma's back, so everything's good, right? And then I find out after going through depression, After having suicidal thoughts to the point where I literally did think about, you know what, maybe I'm not worth it anymore. You see, when you allow the serotonin level to go down in your brain, those are the kind of thoughts that start to take place potentially. And that's why we have to change the trajectory of where we're going and how we think and what we say, and how vulnerable we might be as teachers and coaches and administrators, how vulnerable we might be to maybe change things, because there's no, when most of us, when we're brought up, it's like, okay, silence is how you treat it. That's just how you treat mental illness, silence. I'm still with you, I promise. I just look around and I know that there are many more struggles today than there were in 2005 when I went through it. Because there's a lot more things going on in life nowadays than there ever used to be. A lot more things that can get us in a position where we're not feeling like we need to feel and be the best version of who we need to be. And so, number one thing that I want to tell you about my journey is this. I made a huge mistake by not telling my wife. Now, I will say this, and I'm going to speed this version up. My wife finally figured out that something was wrong with me. Now, what I was doing was, it started day one of practice in 2005 at Newman, and I started having some signs and symptoms. And then, when I started feeling hopeless, and literally within 6 days, I was going into my office after practice and closing the door, putting my head at my desk and crying. And you wonder, like, why would you do that? Like, what? Because my serotonin, level dropped. And when it started to drop, that's how it affected me. I became a lot more emotional. Now, what I wasn't was emotional in front of anybody in public. Oh, I was good at putting on a mask. My player that I talked about earlier today, Dax, he also wrote a song called Depression. That's not as popular as some of those other songs, but it is to me. He talks about in there how we put on the mask and we go out in the public, we do our thing, we fake people out. Man, we're good at that, aren't we? Because we've had great practice at that. And that's what I was doing. And my wife, finally, after about 3.5 weeks approximately, I was at home one night and she sees a tear running down my face. Keep in mind, she'd seen me cry one time in 30 years. And so she started asking questions. What's wrong with you? Why are you so emotional? And I would lie to her. And I'd tell her, I don't know why I'm so emotional, but I'll be fine. Because that's what I'm supposed to say, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Instead of reaching out to the one that loves me the most. I always jokingly say, there are two people in this world that I know would go across the world to save me. One would be my wife and one would be my mother. And I hope that my father would have, but I think he would have, but I know my mom would have. You all know how that goes, right? But I know that young lady sitting over there would. I mean, I'm just blessed to have a wife that decided not to take no for an answer. Because what I was trying to do is, not give her the whole story and not tell her everything that was going on with me. And what she was doing was in the whole process of trying to ask those questions and being intent. She had seen me 3 or 4 times with the tear running down my face. And finally, we're at the Saturday before the opening game of the season, and she sees me at my sink in the kitchen, and she says, what is going on with you? Because I was basically losing it. And I still didn't tell her. She's like, do you need me to take you to practice? And I had every last sign and symptom that you can imagine for the most part. Hopeless, helpless. You can go on. I lost 30 pounds in 5.5 weeks. I can go on down a list of however many signs and symptoms you can imagine. I had. And the suicidal thoughts had started a week and a half, 2 weeks prior to that. I didn't tell her that. Didn't tell her that I'd done some research and I was pretty sure I knew what was going on with me, but I had never had anything like this happen before. So I was trying to tell myself, hey, I'll suck it up and I will get through this. And then by the time we get to this particular day that I'm talking about, I was so far gone, I couldn't even make the decision to get help. I was so far gone. But I was still going to practice, and I was still getting my team ready, and I was still faking them out, and still faking my assistant coaches out. And that particular day, I said, no, you don't need me to take me to practice. She asked me if I did. I said, no. So I went to practice. And I got to tell you just a quick story, then I'm going to turn it over to her. But when I came home from practice that day, I was contemplating just, I didn't know what to do because I was hopeless and helpless. Common sense would tell you, say something so somebody will help you. Or go to your doctor, say something. That's what common sense would tell you. But my serotonin level had dropped so much that I had zero common sense when it came to my mental health. And that particular night, I needed to go scout a team that we were going to play the following week, Sterling College. And they were opening up that night. It was an hour and 10-minute drive from my house to go see them, and I needed to go up there and watch them. And I was just in my chair, and I didn't want to. And my wife comes in, and she sees me just breaking down again. She's like, do you need me to take you up to Sterling College? I said, yeah, I think I do. So she took me up there, and we walked in, and I'm speeding this story up to make sure we get, I respect all of you guys' time today. But we walked in, and she introduced me to a man, and I stood there in that conversation. My wife will finish that story here in just a little bit. And that is the day my wife went from being in denial that something majorly was wrong with me to no longer being in denial. And I hope if there's anybody in here today that's in denial, that today will be the day you will no longer be in denial. That today will be the day that you will say, it is okay not to be okay. What's not okay is not to do something about it. It is okay to tell someone. It is okay to talk to your colleague. It is okay to talk to your administration. It is okay to tell somebody. So I speak to you guys first because I know the struggles sometimes that happen. And every year can be a little different. My wife got doctor's appointments. When we got back on Monday, she came to me and she said, I've got doctor's appointments. We're going to the doctor. We're going to get this fixed. And I looked at my wife and I said, I'm not going to the doctor. You can't make me go to the doctor. That didn't go too good. At the doctor's office at 1 o'clock that day. The doctor said, Coach, you're severely depressed. We're going to send you home. I'm going to keep you home for a little while. You can't coach your team. So I missed the first 8 games of that particular season. And I went home, started taking my medication, antidepressants. He said, it'll take 4 to 6 weeks before you start to feel it. He was exactly right. He said, you'll get worse before you get better, probably. He was exactly right on that. And then he said, hey, I'm going to keep you home until you get better. And I was relieved. And you know why I was relieved? Because he gave me permission to stay home and get better and to get the kind of help that I needed. Anybody in here need permission to get better? You think any of your students in your classroom are going to need permission to get better? You may be the only one that actually sees it. Maybe it's your son, your daughter, your spouse, whoever. But give them permission and let them know it's okay. I'm cutting the story a little bit short here, but I was at home for 5.5 weeks, and I just remember when I was taking my medication. By the way, I still take medication to this day. That's a huge stigma. The stigma is killing a lot of people, by the way. And that's a stigma I hope everybody will, I'm not here not trying to sell medication. I'm just saying that if you have a serotonin level that's not where it needs to be, medication may be what it takes to get it back up. Your doctor will tell you that. Just do what your doctor tells you to do. Go see a counselor. That is not a bad thing. We all need to talk to somebody else. I was never going to talk about this publicly, and maybe there's another time, maybe it's another place that I can tell you the entire story, but there was a bunch of things that happened that I ended up making the decision to go public with why I had missed 5.5 weeks, because I told my wife, don't you tell a soul. Stigma is strong. And after we did that, and I can tell you this, we were on our knees because I didn't want to do it. But we were on our knees and saying, oh, Lord, you want me to be the one? was fighting that one, I'm not going to lie. I don't think I am the one, but I think you know the answer to that prayer was, yeah, you are the one. So I told that media guy, and he put it out there, and man, we just got, 2005, we just got inundated. We estimated over 400 people talked to us in the next 48 hours in some form, emails, calls, in some form or another. And then I'll finish with this one. I'm going to let my wife finish up today. I got a letter in the mail about 2 weeks later. We got a bunch of letters, but 2 weeks later I got a letter in the mail from a 17-year-old high school senior. And you might be teaching one of these high school seniors this year that has the same problem as this young man did. He wrote the letter because he said, Coach, you don't know me, but I read the article in the paper. And he said, I wanted to let you know that I recognized after reading the article, I had a lot of the same signs and symptoms that you were talking about. And he said, so for the very first time, I told somebody that I was struggling. He said, I talked to my mom and dad. And he said, they took me to get help. I'm getting better, Coach. Thank you for saving my life.
Wow.
My last challenge to you guys is your story matters. It may be a one-on-one, your classroom, or at home with your spouse or whoever. Your story matters. Listen, before society said, don't talk about your struggle, especially to your children or grandchildren. Well, how are they going to know it's okay to get help if we don't tell them it's okay to get help? How are they going to know that, man, your poppy, that's what they call me, your poppy, he struggled and this is what went down. And when it happens to you, don't you hesitate, because we're going to be there and we're going to walk the walk with you. And so that's the part that needs to change. We all have to start saying, it's okay to tell at the right time, the right place, to tell somebody about your own struggle. So they'll understand they're not alone in their journey. At this point in time, I'm going to introduce my wonderful wife for 41 years. I am pushing you a little bit today. 11 minutes, so I better hurry. I normally try to give her 15 at least. So this is how I introduce my wife. This is my first team all-world MVP wife. Now, does it get any better than that? Yeah, give her a huge round of applause if you would.
Hey, I show you this picture. Nobody remembers I'm an MVP wife. They just remember that I'm older because I was an 8th grader, he was a 7th grader, and there is my 8th grade picture. And I feel like I should be happy anybody called. Do you see him? I tell my mom all the time, I'm like, Mom, did you not know it was picture day? Like we forgot, right?
I just thought you talked.
Yeah, I should have done something was a little off because I thought I was really cute. But there I was. He was really cute. He was a little bit shorter than me, and he was really cute. And so here we are all these years later. But I look at that picture, and I'm thinking, I don't know what was going on. I'm going to let you look at my grandchildren while I tell the rest of this story. Mark always gives me, I don't have anxiety per se until we speak together, and then he gives me this much time for my time. It always works that way, but here we are. I'm a 32-year educator. You don't have anything on me. I said 320 in-service days. I know what you're thinking, and I know you didn't want to come. And especially when you thought maybe they're going to talk about mental health, I do not want to talk about that. I've heard a lot about mental health. I've been in a lot of mental health presentations in my life. And I've heard a lot of statistics. I know how to de-escalate a situation. I know how to put you in a hold if you get a little out of control. I can take care of that. And yet, I didn't understand that my husband was mentally ill. And I was living with him. And I feel like that's because at the beginning of every single basketball season, he was always gone. I tell everybody he didn't come home and eat supper. And I love saying supper in Kansas because you understand. When I say supper in Long Island, New York, they don't get it. They start looking at each other like, what did she say? And then I remind them Jesus said supper. It wasn't the last dinner. So I remind them of that. But it took me a while to figure it out. Little by little by little, he started. I would come home from work. He never beat me home from work. And he would be home. There were lots and lots and lots of signs and symptoms. Then came the day that I had to drive him up to Sterling. Now, I don't go scouting and I don't go recruiting unless there's a shopping mall close by. Then I go scouting and recruiting. You guys know where Sterling, Kansas is. There's nothing there. And I did not go to shop, I went to watch Mark. He reclined the seat in the car and he cried all the way there. All the way, he would look at me and I would be like, I don't know what's wrong with you. What do you have to be sad about? You've got a good life. I don't understand. And he'd say, I can't live this way. You have to do something because I can't live this way anymore. When we walked into the gym, we saw my teaching partner's dad. I said, Mark, let's go meet Joe. And we walked over to meet Joe, and Mark did shake Joe's hand. But then Mark did not speak to Joe. Not one word. Joe said, hey, Coach, you guys were so good last year. Wow, national tournament. I've been watching your career a long time. You guys are doing great. How are you going to be this year? And Mark didn't respond. And I looked at Mark, and I looked at Joe, and I was getting more uncomfortable. I was getting more embarrassed. So I started answering for Mark. I said, I think we're going to be okay. You know, our point guard's a little iffy. That's a problem, and we have to stay healthy and eligible. I don't know. But I did what I think every coach's wife would do. I started answering, and I was covering up. I was enabling Mark to stand there. Right then and there, I decided the only thing I could do wrong was nothing. And isn't that what we've done over time? You guys know when your colleague is struggling. You do. Just listen to conversations. We self-medicate. We grown-ups, we just self-medicate. That's what we do. We say things like, oh, nothing a beer can't fix. I need to get home and get a glass of wine, I'll be fine. We do that. I started noticing one of my colleagues, and this is after we went through this. I started noticing one of my colleagues was gone. Mondays. Lots of Mondays. I started circling those on the calendar because I started thinking, I think this lady needs help. And I started circling the Mondays that she was gone. I finally went to her. I would have never done this before, but I asked her some hard questions. And I said, I noticed that you've been struggling and not coming to school on Mondays. I just want you to know that I will help you if you need help. She started crying and she said, you're right. I'm struggling. When are we going to do that more? We've lived a long time by not asking those hard questions. When I started asking Mark those really hard questions, and I realized if he was having a heart attack, we would jump in immediately. If he was having a stroke, we would do the same thing. And yet we see people struggling every single day, and we don't ask those hard questions. So today you're going to make a change. Today you're going to decide that when you see your colleague struggling, you're just going to ask, hey, are you okay? Because I'm here to help you. If you need me to go with you, if you need to make a doctor's appointment, I'm here. I'll help you make that call. I'll walk beside you. Because that's how we're going to make a change. And I do think we're talking about this more. But we lose somebody in the United States nearly every 11 minutes to suicide. We will lose 11 people. It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make sense to me that we're talking more and we're still not making an impact. That's why Mark and I decided to do this. When I came home from school, I went to school. I went to school that morning. On Sunday afternoon, I had called our insurance card. There's a number on the back. I didn't know there was a number on the back because when they handed me my insurance packet all those years, nobody said, here's your behavioral health services. You can find that information here. They didn't tell me that. When I got us a counseling appointment, I got us a doctor's appointment. I got the pre-K teacher to cover for me. I told my principal we were having a crisis at home and I needed to go. And I thought I had done everything in my power when he said, you have to help me because I can't live this way. And he looked up at me and he said, I'm not going. You can't make me. Luckily, I know a lot of really big men because Mark has been a coach for a very long time. His assistant was 6'6" and weighed 280, and I figured he could pick Mark up. And I leaned over Mark, and I said, you are going to get up out of that chair, and you are going to walk to the car, because if you don't, I'm going to call Chris. He's going to shove you in the car. I don't care how you get in that car, but you are getting in. He said, I'll walk. That's a good decision. I'm not going to tell you that overnight it was perfect, because it was not. It took, medication and counseling are not dirty words. We've made them dirty words. As soon as this came out, as soon as we started talking publicly, which I lied about it for weeks, I didn't tell anybody what was going on. But when it came out, I can't tell you how many of my staff, the colleagues, came to me and they'd say, I've taken medication 5 years, don't tell anybody. Okay, I won't. But if we did start talking about it, we could make a change. And we're still in that spot today. Keep talking. Reach out is the only way we're going to make a difference. Now, we went through, I would say our life went back pretty much normal. It took a while. It was hard. I went to counseling with Mark. I went to doctor's appointments with Mark. I left my job with 72 sick leave days. Like, you're the only people that understand what I'm about to say. It's easier to come to school sick than it is to write lesson plans, for somebody else to do it, and then for you to have to clean up the problem with the class when you got back. So I didn't miss school. And yet I went to every single doctor's appointment with Mark, because I needed help too. I was the high school cheer coach, and I was teaching second grade, and I was managing the media, and I was managing the basketball team. It was hard. Mark went on to coach for another 11 years. I thought that was our life. I thought I was going to be the one that people would come to and say, I'd go to a basketball game and people would seek me out and say, are you Coach Potter's wife? I need help. It's my mom. It's my sister. I thought that's who we were. Now, when Mark came home a few years ago and he said, honey, I think we should quit our jobs and we should look around and go around the nation, and we'll just see if people will listen to our mental health journey, because we can help people. I said, I said, God made me talk to you, but God did not talk to me. And I don't think I'm going to do that. And here I am. And I'm standing here before you today. I want to read this to you. And I'm going to tell you that my passion comes out in tears. And I don't apologize for that. I was a passionate teacher. And I'm just passionate about this topic. On Thanksgiving Day, we did a round. We love to talk to high schools. We talked to, if suicide is the second, well, not if, it is the second leading cause of death for 10-year-olds. We speak to 6th graders through seniors. That's been one of our target groups to speak to. We don't change the story. We don't make it different. We tell the truth, because that's what we need to do. Let's start talking truth. Kids know when you're not telling them the truth. When we spoke, last year we went to 15 schools in 5 days in Nebraska. On Thanksgiving Day, I got this email. I can't read it without lots of tears. I was a blubbering mess when I talked with Nanette after your presentation. She made me promise I would not carry out my plan, and that I would talk to a medical professional. She was a music teacher. I am alive and on the road to recovery because God put you in the right place at the right time. November 13th has now become a special day, a blessing on my calendar, because that will always be the anniversary of the day that I met you and took your powerful story to heart. Your message has an incredible impact. Thank you for sharing, breaking the myths and the stigma, and working to save lives, including mine. When she came to talk to me, I asked her straight out. I said, do you have your suicide plan? She said, I do. And I looked at her and I said, you do not have my permission. I do not give you the permission. We are going to get you help. You've done the first brave thing. Let's do the second brave thing. We did get her help. She went to her medical doctor. The medical doctor that she went to had a son that was in one of the audiences that we had spoken to, and he went home, and over the supper table, I did say supper, over the supper table, they had talked about us. So the doctor said, I know what you heard, and you are right, and we are getting you out today. We just talked to her. She just retired, and she had just gotten home from a vacation with her husband. And I'm so thankful that she had that opportunity, because she didn't carry out the plan. Ask the hard questions. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. This story also makes tears come. Get ready. You guys all know better than anyone the great impact that you have. You get an opportunity to change people's lives and change the trajectory of where they're going. When I did my master's program, and I didn't get my master's for 20 years after I got my bachelor's, but when I did my master's program, I didn't think that I had a whole lot of projects that made me the greatest teacher ever. But there was one thing that I did that I felt that inspired me to remember why I do what I do. Why did I do what I did for 32 years? We all have a child that that kid that comes to your head. The last 10 years, I was the reading specialist at school. I'm going to tell you a story about a little boy named Josh. Josh came to school one day in about October. And you know the kid. Mom walks him in, no backpack, no school supplies, no nothing. She brings him into the school. We don't know Josh is coming. No head up, no notice. Drops Josh off. Josh, they didn't have the classroom ready because they had to go get the supplies and get everything together. So they put Josh in the library for a few minutes. The librarian decided to give him a STAR test. Let's see where he is. He wasn't 5 questions into the STAR test before she was calling me and saying, when you have a minute, get down here, please. You're going to need to meet Josh. She said, he's a 3rd grader. He can't read. I said, okay, I'm on my way. I headed down there and I met Josh. Sweet little boy. And I said, Josh, my name's Mrs. Potter. I said, yes, I am Harry Potter's aunt. So I said, you and I are going to be great friends. I can tell. I started working with Josh, and Josh was a sponge. He learned everything. I think Josh has been in a lot of places, and he just hadn't settled in long enough to really learn to read. So Josh and I worked every day. Josh got to stay with us for 1 year. By the time he left 3rd grade, Josh was reading on grade level. He's my miracle story. And then in October, when he went to 4th grade, Josh left the same way Josh came. His mom pulled up. We didn't know he was leaving. Josh left. Before he left, he came into me. He said, Mrs. Potter, I just want to say goodbye. I hugged Josh. And I told him, I said, you go be great, Josh, because I know you are. I know you're going to be great. You keep learning. You keep trying, because I know you're going to be a great man. I've never seen Josh again, but I'm going to challenge you to do this. Write that name in your planning book. Write that name. Write a name of someone that you know you made a difference with, because we all have a Josh. Write that name. And on those hard days, look at that name, because that's why we're here. You are 1%ers. That's what Mark and I want to be in this world, is a 1%er. We want to make a difference. We want to make an impact. You get to do that, unlike any other profession. It took 12 pictures to get this good. But they're really cute. But the oldest one, she struggles. They don't see it at school because she's a perfectionist. They see the perfect kid. Keep your eye on the perfect kid. because they're the ones. Perfection comes at a cost. Keep your eyes open. The last thing, you guys are pretty good. I went to your bathroom over here. You've got mental health information in your bathrooms. That's a good job. I've been to, this is my 5th school in 3 weeks, and you're the only one that has it in there. But there are some mental health. These numbers need to be everywhere. If you don't have this in your syllabus, if you don't have it in your locker room, they better be there. Because when a kid won't tell you, they'll text. It's important information. And then the last is this. If you need us, Mark and I will be here. We had a phone call a few weeks ago. Somebody had saved our number for 5 years. And Mark, the man just said, I heard you speak at the farm forum. My son's struggling. Can you talk to him? And Mark called him and talked to him. The only thing that we can do wrong is nothing. It's time to stop doing that. We can make an impact and we can make a change. I'll let Mark finish up.
Okay, we have 2 t-shirts to hand out here. Yeah, I got you covered. You got to give me the how-to right there. So 2 t-shirts. Here's how you potentially can win one of these t-shirts. I am going to start a sentence and you will finish the sentence with, it's a one-word finish. You've heard us say it in the presentation. T-shirts are kind of cool. They say D2 Up. That's the name of our business, dedicated to uncommon principles. And we always enjoy, throwing out t-shirts, and sometimes teachers love it, and sometimes they are too cool for school. But it's all good either way, however you guys handle it. You guys have been an incredible audience, but